At any rate, so thank you for having me here. I appreciate it. I appreciate Kevin and Kristen taking the time to make sure that I can be here, both hosting and then also being at Salem, so they're not bereft of help. And also, at this morning, I was able to thank Roger and Luis and people there who were at that service. But I know that Scott and Nita are here at this service, and I don't think I'm missing anybody else that's usually at the house builds. But I want to say thank you for all of the, it's not an easy thing to spend successive Saturdays. For a while there, it was every other Saturday during the pandemic, you know what I mean? And so I just want to say thanks to those folks for helping build this great house that we're doing together as people of hope and people of Salem. It's a real blessing. And part of the reason it's a real blessing is, our neighborhood, which has now been renamed Vistula for marketing purposes, is it's an interesting place because it's a place that has the highest concentration of economic poverty in the city of Toledo. Back when redlining used to be a thing, which was a way of saying some people are allowed to buy houses anywhere, and some people you can't. They won't give you loans for certain areas of the city. And so it ended up being actually the case that a lot of people who were poor, who were black, were relegated to just a few neighborhoods actually in the city of Toledo. And ours historically has been one. And so now we find businesses coming in from the outside. And that's a good thing in some ways because it brings some economy, brings something to do from people from the outside. It's some kind of touch point for the neighborhood. Some people are redoing houses there, as cost prohibitive as that may be in a historic district. But as people do that, we still sit on the interior of the neighborhood and sort of wonder what happens to the people there. 1/3 of the land is vacant or abandoned. And so those of us who have been there through that time period, it's sort of a startling development to see so much going on. At some point, I did something smart. I don't always do something smart, but sometimes I get lucky. And it occurred to me that really I needed to be doing a bigger advocacy thing. And so I've had the opportunity to do that, and I went to Washington, D.C., right? And so I'm roaming around Washington, D.C., and I have all these appointments with people from other agencies. And so we're going to Sherrod Brown's office. We're going to Marcy Captor's office. We're going down to J.D. Vance's office, which is by far the most interesting because they shoved that guy down in a basement, And the other ones had nice big, big windows and these big historic, the Rayburn building or whatever it is. At any rate, in doing that, we were trying to push forward a proposal, and part of the proposal was to create 25 new homes in our neighborhood, right? First-time homeowners, people that have gone through a self-sufficiency thing, involves financial coaching and all that, and they could become first-time homeowners, right, in this neighborhood that we have, where, that would be great. That'd be another group of people, maybe some of the adult children of people who have lived in our neighborhoods, the ones that have gone off and have been a little more fortunate. Maybe they could be the ones that could return and live there, right? Coming back to the neighborhood they know, but coming in as a new income bracket, coming into a new situation. And so it's a really hopeful thing. Interestingly enough, one of the leaders in our business community, when they heard about this, they said to somebody in that political sphere, they said, well, where's the money going? Who's getting the money? Where's the money? You know what I mean? And it was interesting to me, right? Because that's certainly a question that you can ask when you hear that, right? I mean, I think about that proposal, and I'm thinking about the 25 homeowners that could impact, right? Thinking about the 25 buildings that could no longer be vacant, that will not be the next demolition, that will not be dilapidated, that won't weigh down on us. But then somebody else hears it, and their idea goes, well, who gets the money? And why would they say it? Because they want the money, right? It's interesting. Today, we hear another story from the gospel about money. And I listen to an audiobook version of the Bible every year, or at least I started doing that so I could pretend to be as good as the bishop. And and actually, it's worked out really well for me. And so I learn something new every year. And this year, I learned something interesting, because you have various thoughts while you hear this playing as you wash the dishes or do the laundry or whatever. And I never realized how much Jesus talks about money. I mean, this guy's always talking about money, right? Not like we talk about it, but in a different sense. You know, I had a friend from high school. He learned all these foreign languages. So he went down to Mexico. He met a girl from Germany. They only spoke Spanish. They learned each other's languages. They're married now. They live in Germany. He runs a foreign language business over there. And so he spent a long time. He came back, and he says, you know how you know you're in America? And I said, why? He said, because people are always talking about money. You know, he says, it isn't like that over there, he said. You know, he said, it wasn't like that in Mexico. It wasn't like that over there in Europe. He says, people are always talking about money over here. You know, we talk about money quite a bit. And Jesus does as well. But I think that the way that Jesus talks about it is very, very, very different, you know. In our story today, we're set up by the Pharisees. And they have a plot to trap Jesus. You know, they want to get him to say something that's untoward so that he will alienate the authorities and get himself into trouble, right? That way, the demise that they have planned for him will be enacted by other people. Keeps their hands relatively clean. Kind of conniving people, you know, very conniving, like a bad chess match. So they say, they send their disciples to him, right? They have their own disciples. Think about that for a second. And then says, Teacher, we know that you are sincere and that you teach the way of God in accordance with truth and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax. And they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, Whose head is this and whose title? And they answered, The emperor's. Then he said to them, Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's. It's kind of ingenious how Jesus gets out of the trap, right? You know, he's able to not say something against the authorities, not say something against the tax that the Romans would impose. And unlike our culture, you know, where if you complain about the government, back then they were liable to kill you. So he gets out of that trap rather quickly and easily. But he's also able to say something about God, right? It's interesting because it starts out about tax, so it involves money. But then Jesus makes it even more about money by asking for that coin, making an astute observation that's actually pretty simple but is brilliant in the moment, and then turns things around so that he doesn't alienate really the authorities, but at the same time brings attention back around to God. But as I was saying, this isn't the only time that Jesus brings money into the question. You know, there's the parable about the woman who loses a valuable coin. So she turns the whole house upside down, sweeps it out, looking for just this one coin. There's a story about a man who realizes that there is a treasure out there in a field. So what does he do? He goes and buys the whole field just so that he can have the treasure. Also about treasure, though, he says, you know, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. Jesus is always taking the image of money, the image of wealth, and is talking about it. But he talks about it in a way different way than we do. And I think if I had to sum it up, I might say it like this, is that Jesus values money, right? Jesus knows it's valuable, it's worth something. He uses it in a valuable sense in his stories. But it's never the end. It's always the means to the end. And the end of that always involves God and God's people. To go back just a minute, you know, I was in the community center in our neighborhood the other day, the Friendly Center. It's actually owned by the Methodists. And, you know, the fact that it's owned by the Methodists, it's one of the reasons I'm really glad I'm a Lutheran preacher, because I have a lot of disagreements with those people. You know, I feel like George Costanza's father, you know, at Festivus. You know, I got problems with you people. You know, like, you know, if I did that in the Methodist church, I'd probably be fired. You wouldn't see me. They'd move me out to, like, Archibald or something. But no offense to Archibald, but come on now, you know. So at any rate, I was sitting there, and it's one of these numerous conversations about trying to turn around this community center, about how good it would be for us if it was like fully functioning. You know, and I'm looking and the paint's peeling off the walls. The radiators, I don't know, they just look really ugly. It's just not like, it's just not a good atmosphere, floors sagging. The executive director, who's a Methodist layperson, is doing this for zero salary, but is working as an ED. She has a little heater in her office, right? This tiny little heater, and she's, that's the only really truly warm room in the building, And as we're sitting there, we have, the director of the Aurora Project, Denise Fox, and you got Father Larry from the Greek Orthodox Church down there, and we're all sitting there talking, and we're thinking about, the issue that they face, funding, right, programming, talent, people who care about the situation. And as I was sitting there, I thought about how odd is it that you have a neighborhood of the most economic need, right? And it's the neighborhood that has the non-functioning community center. It's always on its last legs. The place where you need it most is the place that has it least, And I think that that's a reflection sort of on our culture and how we use wealth out there in our world, right? Out here in America and in Toledo and in general. It's not everybody, but I think it's like we're always worried about the scarcity. One of the reasons I like working with the people from Hope, especially on the house project, but also in other capacities, is, I don't know, maybe I like to think it's a larger thing. Either that or I'm really lucky in the crop that I got here, you know what I mean? But it's like, take Roger, for example. I don't know if you know Roger. He's at that other service. But if he was here right now, he'd spend a half hour before and after talking with each one of you. That's the kind of guy he is. See, he's shaking his head. He knows what I mean, But Roger, one of the reasons I like working with Roger is Roger's a can-do guy, right? I can't tell you how many nonprofit or ministry meetings I go to, Like I'm notorious for skipping clergy gatherings because of this, but it's like, oh, where are we going to get the resources? Oh, there's no money. Oh, no, we can't do that. There's no way, we don't have enough people. Like we can't, you know what I mean? And I understand that, and those are concerns. But I don't want to hear that, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear the defeatist tones of anything, I don't have time for that. It's either I make it work or I don't, you know what I mean? And one of the things I like about Roger is Roger's one of those people that believes inherently that it can be done and will fight tooth and nail to get it done and do it well, And I respect that a great deal because as much as I believe that, he believes that more. As much as I want to embody a positive attitude, trust me, he embodies that a lot more than me. It's amazing. It's such a gift, right? It's like God's put a little energy inside of him and just made him go, And he's not the only one. I think a lot of people are that way, Many of our volunteers, some of them have built their own houses, for goodness sakes, you know what I'm saying? Like many of those volunteers just have such a can-do attitude and they get stuff done. And that's why when I'm in those meetings and I hear those things about scarcity, it troubles me. Because God has so made the world that there are resources in it. There are possibilities. There are good people. There is wealth and treasure to be found and used for good purposes in our world. We are not yet bereft, Even when times are tough, there are ways to make things happen. Frankly, Salem shouldn't work. Like it really shouldn't work. I saw Pastor Kevin sneak in. He could tell you being there on a Sunday morning it should not work. But it does work. It does work. It works because of people like you, and it works because of many other partners that help from all over the place. And the reason that is because I think God has given us as human beings such gifts and talent that we can use it towards purposes that are good in our world. God has made a Roger for this project at 1133, right? God has made partners in ecology that are going to help us to build an arboretum on a vacant lot that the land bank will give to us, right? Like there are all kinds of beautiful things that happen with people out in the world. All it really takes is the belief and the trust that God can help us. Now, I'm not saying don't make wise decisions. I'm not saying don't use your resources in a good way, but I think that God really does allow human beings to use their gifts and sow good things into the world. And I think Jesus recognizes that, right? When Jesus is talking about these treasures, He's not just using them as an illustration, but he uses money to show people that they are worth it, right? That treasure that's found in a field, that's the kingdom of heaven. And that includes you. That coin that's valuable, that the woman turns the whole house over to find, that is the kingdom of heaven. And that involves you. God puts these treasures into the world for people like you, people in the north end of Toledo. We are part of the value that God finds. Because ultimately, while money is useful, well, it's something that we need in our lives so we have heat and clothing, so that we can eat food, raise our kids, right? There are things that we have to use money for. It's not about the money. It's about the people. And it's about serving God by serving the people. Moving towards the conclusion. I said this at the first service, and they say, there's a saying by a pastor called Eugene Peterson. Like, he thinks he's such a good pastor that he wrote a book called The Pastor. And so he must have been a pretty good pastor. I don't really know. But anyways, in that book, he says every pastor has one or two sermons, really. Like, everything is just a variation of those. And so, in essence, if you break down my sermon, it goes like this. And I believe it's true. You can test this. It works. At the center of every single human being, at the very core, the root of them, like if you cracked them open, right, and there was like a solid core, there'd be one question that resides at the very center of that human being. And that question can be put different ways, but it goes like this. Do I matter? Am I loved? Is my life worth living? Do I hold value, right? Every single human being has that question. Now, we can do our best to numb ourselves to it. We can try not to think about it. We can move away from it. But always, hovering in the distance, there is that question inside each and every human being. As a human being lives their life, they wrestle with it, and as they move to the end of their life, that question will inevitably beat like their very pulse in their ears, right? And they will wonder, does my life matter? Now, if you want to destroy a human being, then all you need to do is find ridiculously strong ways to say no to that question. To tell them, no, you don't matter. No, you are not a priority. No, you are not valuable. And if a human being hears that in the right ways for them, if they hear it loudly and resonates and it seems to engulf their life, then unfortunately that human being will begin to break down. They'll become depressed. They will feel poorly about themselves. Self-esteem will begin to dwindle and disappear. However, if the question is answered honestly, if it's answered with the actual truth, a human being will hear the word yes. And they will understand that they are valuable. They will understand that they are loved. They will understand that they are worthy of life, right? That happiness is not too much of a big ask, right? That contentment is a good and achievable thing, that your life matters, right? And so, as we deal with human beings in the world, right, as we move and live in the world, God desires to use wealth in ways that tell human beings that they matter. God desires that wealth is used for the sake of humanity, so that we know that we matter and so that others know that they matter, so that people know that they are loved by God, that they partake in the wealth of God's blessing, so that they understand that though we aren't at kingdom come yet, that they are part of God's kingdom, that they are beloved, that they are included, and that they are valuable, that they are worth seeking out, that they are worth investment. And the good news, too, is that when we believe that about others, we actually believe that about ourselves. Because it's not a far leap to begin thinking that other people don't matter, and then ultimately to feel that we ourselves don't. But that's not the world that God wants, and that's not the world that God has created. God has made generous people in this world. God has sown abundant gifts. God gives each one of us meaning and value. And for that good gift on this day and always, we say, thanks be to God. Amen.